Switzerland, a country synonymous with alpine serenity, neutrality, and peace, has not participated in a military conflict since 1815. A remarkable 500-year streak that has solidified its reputation as a global emblem of stability. With a GDP approaching $800 billion in 2024 and an unemployment rate below 3%, this small nation has thrived not by wielding military might, but by cultivating financial prowess and diplomatic restraint. Yet, in an unprecedented move, Switzerland publicly criticized former U.S. President Donald Trump following a controversial statement at the World Economic Forum, WEF, in Davos. This rare departure from its neutral stance, sparked by Trump's call for tariffs on European nations, long-standing U.S. allies, offers a window into the evolving interplay between neutrality and power in a volatile world. What drove Switzerland to break its silence? And what does this signify for smaller nations navigating the shifting tides of global influence? The spark at Davos. The story begins at the WEF, an annual gathering of global leaders in the Swiss Alps, where economic policies are debated and alliances reinforced. In early 2025, Trump, attending as a prominent figure post-presidency, ignited a firestorm by advocating for steep tariffs on European countries. His proposal aimed to penalize nations he accused of exploiting U.S. economic generosity despite decades of collaboration through NATO, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. For Switzerland, a nation that typically sidesteps international trade disputes, Trump's rhetoric crossed the line. His brash delivery, marked by a dismissive tone toward European sovereignty, clashed with the Swiss ethos of fairness, respect, and multilateral cooperation. Switzerland's response was swift and uncharacteristically vocal. Government officials issued a formal statement condemning Trump's tariff proposal as a threat to global economic stability, emphasizing that unilateral actions by superpowers undermine the principles of free trade that Switzerland has long championed. This wasn't just about economics, it was personal. Trump's leadership style, seen as impulsive, confrontational, and antithetical to Swiss values, provoked a reaction from a nation that prides itself on restraint. The Swiss didn't stop at words. At the Basel Carnival, a cultural hallmark where citizens don masks and parade through the streets, participants used the event to mock Trump's policies, subtly yet pointedly. Effigies and satirical floats depicted him as a disruptor of peace, a rare public expression of dissent in a country where protests are nearly unheard of. Why Switzerland spoke out? Switzerland's reaction might seem surprising given its historical neutrality, but it reflects a calculated defense of national interests and values. Since the Congress of Vienna in 1815, Switzerland has avoided military entanglements, a policy rooted in geopolitical pragmatism and economic strategy. As a global financial hub, home to the Bank for International Settlements and numerous multinational organizations, Switzerland relies on open markets and stable international relations. Trump's tariffs threaten this equilibrium, potentially disrupting trade with the European Union, Switzerland's largest economic partner, and signaling a broader retreat from multilateralism. Moreover, the Swiss response underscores a growing unease with Trump's leadership model. Unlike historical figures like Napoleon, Hitler, or Putin, whose aggression Switzerland navigated with silence, Trump's approach struck a different chord. His tariffs weren't an act of war, but a breach of the diplomatic decorum and economic interdependence the Swiss hold dear. A United Nations report highlights that Switzerland's neutrality isn't merely a passive stance, it's a deliberate strategy to maintain independence and influence. By speaking out, Switzerland signaled that even a neutral nation has limits to its patience when core principles are at stake. This episode also reflects the Swiss people's attitude. Surveys in 2025 showed widespread dissatisfaction with Trump, surpassing even their historical aversion to authoritarian figures. His bombastic style and disregard for smaller nations, autonomy clashed with Switzerland's belief in equitable international relationships. The Basel Carnival became a creative outlet for this sentiment, a peaceful yet potent critique that resonated globally. The broader context: US and Canada trade escalation. Switzerland's rebuke of Trump unfolded against a backdrop of escalating trade tensions elsewhere, notably between the US and Canada. In March 2025, Trump, back in the spotlight as a political influencer, doubled tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel from 25% to 50%, citing national security concerns. This move came shortly after Ontario imposed a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the US, a retaliatory jab at earlier US policies. The Dow Jones plummeted over 600 points within 48 hours, and financial experts, including Goldman Sachs, raised the US recession risk to 20%. Trump didn't stop there, threatening additional tariffs on Canadian auto imports, a move that could cripple an industry employing millions across both nations. Canada's response was equally fierce. Premier Doug Ford labeled Trump's actions an unjustified attack, warning of plant closures, unemployment, and inflation. Canada prepared countermeasures, including tariffs on U.S. agriculture, automotive goods, and energy exports, levers that could cost the U.S. dearly. Ontario, which supplies 10% of the U.S. power grid, threatened to cut electricity exports, a move that could spike U.S. energy prices by 20% and trigger blackouts in states like New York and Michigan. The Canadian Ministry of Trade estimated a $16 billion loss from Trump's tariffs in the past year alone, with projections of further damage if the trade war persists. This tit-for-tat escalation highlights the fragility of global supply chains and the ripple effects of unilateral policies. U.S. companies face soaring production costs, passing the burden to consumers already grappling with inflation. Canada, meanwhile, eyed alternative markets like China and the EU, potentially reshaping North American economic alliances. The U.S., once dismissive of Canadian oil, pivoted to revive the Keystone XL pipeline, a project scrapped years earlier, underscoring its dependence on Canada as 4 million barrels of daily crude exports. Neutrality under pressure. Switzerland's reaction to Trump and the US-Canada trade war raised profound questions about neutrality in a polarizing world. For over 5 centuries, Switzerland has balanced independence with influence, leveraging its neutrality to mediate conflicts and host international bodies. Yet Trump's actions, whether at Davos or in North America, challenge this model. When a superpower flouts cooperation for dominance, can smaller nations afford to stay silent? Switzerland's critique suggests that neutrality doesn't equate to passivity. It's a stance that adapts to protect national interests. The US-Canada conflict amplifies this tension. If Canada, a close US ally, resorts to economic retaliation, what hope remains for neutral states to avoid entanglement? The Swiss response at Davos and Basel may signal a trend. Smaller nations, even those committed to peace, might increasingly assert their voices as global powers adopt hardline stances. This shift could reshape international relations, forcing countries to choose between neutrality and proactive defense of their values. Global implications and the path ahead. Trump's tariff policies didn't just rile Switzerland and Canada, they sent shockwaves through the European Union, China, and beyond. The EU, already wary of US protectionism, began exploring trade diversification, while China positioned itself as a potential buyer of Canadian resources. If the US persists, retaliatory tariffs could spiral into a global trade war, risking recession not just in North America, but worldwide. Financial markets, already jittery, reflected this unease, with the Toronto Stock Exchange and Dow Jones signaling investor panic. For Switzerland, the stakes are clear. Its $800 billion economy thrives on stability, not chaos. By criticizing Trump, it aimed to safeguard the multilateral framework that underpins its prosperity. Yet this move also risked drawing Switzerland into the fray, a departure from its 500-year tradition. Will other neutral nations, like Sweden or Austria, follow suit as global tensions mount? The answer hinges on whether superpowers like the US recalibrate their approach or double down on unilateralism. The US and Canada trade war offers a cautionary tale. Both nations stand to lose. Canada, its export markets, the US, its energy security and consumer affordability. Reviving Keystone XL might ease tensions, but environmental and logistical hurdles loom large. More broadly, Trump's strategy, whether calculated or chaotic, tests the resilience of alliances built over decades. His press conference remarks in 2025, questioning NATO's value and flip-flopping on tariffs, only deepened the uncertainty, leaving businesses and governments scrambling. Switzerland's strong response to Trump at the WEF, coupled with the US-Canada trade escalation, marks a pivotal moment. A nation renowned for peace and neutrality chose to speak out, not with weapons, but with words and symbolic acts, reflecting a world where even the steadfast are pushed to their limits. This episode, sparked by a simple action in Davos, reveals the fragility of global harmony when power overshadows cooperation. As the world becomes more polarized, Switzerland's stand may inspire other small nations to reassess their roles. Neutrality, once a shield, might evolve into a platform for advocacy when core values, peace, fairness, and stability are threatened. The US, meanwhile, faces a reckoning. Its influence depends on allies it can no longer afford to alienate. Whether this leads to reconciliation or further conflict, one thing is certain: the ripples from Davos will echo far beyond the Alps, challenging the balance of power and neutrality for years to come.